Hello dear friends, this sequel is very many people have been waiting for, and I hope you will support this video by liking, commenting and subscribing to the channel. Enjoy! Lloyd and Xavier were flying at great speed. The servant was complaining that the Dragon King could have sent them straight to the mermaids, and Lloyd noticed that Xavier did not understand how to interact in society. After a while they were near the town of Cremo, and although all the information Lloyd had was that the mermaids were at the bottom of a stormy sea, he understood the sea that had been described and headed for it. The town had a life of its own. As it was a trading town, there were many ships at the wharf. At that time, the townspeople were trading in strange things, and Lloyd thought that the place was definitely revitalized. In the novel, the town was completely destroyed and the count who helped Xavier was killed. In the novel the town was poor and many people and even children were begging for alms, while now the town was filled with smiles of full families. It seemed as if all the people around were truly happy. Lloyd watched all these people closely and began to tremble. He was glad that he had made this town so happy, but he also began to cry violently because he should have asked for a bigger reward. Xavier noticed how his master began to cry. Involuntarily a smile began to form on his face. He realized that his master was a really kind man, while Lloyd thought that he should have at least received the commission, because it was all thanks to him. Outside the doors came the voice of the count, who was fiercely harassing his guests. He began to clap Lloyd on the back saying how much he liked him. After the count lifted the guy, he decided to immediately move on to the purpose of the visit. It turned out that the hero's request was a ship that would help him in his search for the kingdom of mermaids. Lloyd realized that most likely his interlocutor will seem impossible, but the count was surprised to hear about a talented captain, who was called a big liar, because always when he was drunk, he said that in his youth was in the kingdom of mermaids. After the story the count said that he could introduce them, and it seemed that for Lloyd it was exactly what was needed. The hero clenched his fist, unable to contain his joy. After a while, the box started talking about how this captain got to the kingdom of mermaids, and he told a secret, namely that you need to sing, because that is how mermaids determine whether the enemy in front of them or a friend. It seemed that Lloyd and Xavier listened attentively, but after a moment Lloyd's face twisted at the words about the song. He asked about other ways. You know how he sings. And the captain said that it seems that only a handsome guy can pass. The captain began his story. A long time ago he fell off the box and found himself in the open sea, but his disappearance no one even noticed. Some time later in front of him appeared mermaids, which were f***ing creepy. After such a fright, he remembered that you need to sing that they would realize that man is not the enemy, and at that moment he began to scream with all his might, trying to sing. He said that from such a roar mermaids frowned, but later just moments later on their faces appeared a smile. He explained that the mermaids listen not to the music itself, but to the human soul. Lloyd thought about this expression, and immediately remembered his parents, and later his brother. Lloyd made a serious face, and asked the captain for a boat, and also asked him to take him to the mermaid kingdom. The captain started to refuse, as it was not the time to catch whales. At that time Lloyd took out a bag of gold, the power of which literally intoxicated the captain, and he instantly agreed. It was late at night when they arrived at the place. Lloyd was traveling on the ship on purpose, because the mermaids could feel the threat. That's how desperate he was. The captain told them that they were already surrounded, as mermaids are very cold to strangers. Lloyd looked at his small crew and Xavier wondered. There were thousands of mermaids around the box, and Lloyd prepared himself before starting to sing, expressing all the pain he was going through. The boy began to sing, trying his best to get his thoughts to the mermaids. The mermaids began to listen to the tune, and Lloyd continued to sing furiously, trying his best. The mermaids seemed touched by this singing. Even Xavier was shocked by it. Lloyd did his best, and it seemed like the mermaids were listening intently, but after a moment the color of the water turned red with the blood that came out of the mermaid's ears. A moment later a spear flew at Lloyd and broke the tree he was standing on. One of the mermaids started shouting that he was declaring war and ordered his subordinates to shoot. A moment later they threw a great number of spears. The boat began to collapse under a barrage of strong attacks. Lloyd did not understand, for the captain had promised that if he was sincere everything would be all right. At that time a man slapped Lloyd across the face, calling the lad crazy, for he had asked to sing a song, not put a proclamation on everyone. Lloyd was more hurt than ever, for this time he really tried. Xavier expressed his shock that Lloyd's sincerity was so strong that the mermaid queen declared war on them. Xavier headed into the air, after which he found himself above a huge number of mermaids. Suddenly their queen ordered everyone to stop the attack. Lloyd was shocked by this outcome. She turned to Xavier, who couldn't understand what was happening. And the mermaids. showing their pumped-up hands with their hearts, told him to pass. Xavier seemed shocked at the outcome. He looked at Lloyd and saw the saddest and most depressed face he had ever seen in his life. Xavier asked if the mermaid's words were an invitation to their kingdom, but they didn't hesitate to answer and said that they were, which surprised the boy. The Queen of Mermaids made a grey look, and after she seductively raised her hair, said that the reason for such a sharp decision was the face of Xavier. After these words, the guy did not have a question. He was clear. At that time, Lloyd, who was completely defeated morally, thought about how crazy the mermaids were. Xavier asked if mermaids could sense emotion through song, and the Queen said they could, but then said that Xavier's face was so beautiful that it didn't matter if it was a song or a curse. Xavier didn't even seem surprised at the power of his appearance. While Lloyd was once again convinced that Xavier was the protagonist, the servant said his face became the face of Lloyd's crushing song, and he ordered him to shut up and finally come down. Lloyd introduced himself, and also added that he was Xavier's master. The mermaid's face twisted so much after seeing Lloyd that it smelled of concrete discrimination. Lloyd thanked the mermaid queen for inviting them to the kingdom, but she quickly dashed all the guy's hopes with the words that he was definitely not suitable. Well, that this would be the case, and he had already prepared his cunning plan. Xavier asked if Lloyd would be allowed in if he asked for it, and the mermaid's face immediately changed, and she seemed to be willing to do anything to keep Xavier close. Lloyd's face was very depressed, and as soon as Xavier looked in his direction, tears began to form on his face. He explained it with salt around him, pretending that such humiliation did not upset him. Lloyd realized that Xavier had enough to exist. He didn't even have to work to get what he wanted. The mermaid held out a necklace that would help Xavier to stay underwater, but she threw it right in Lloyd's face. The guy swam to the kingdom thinking that no matter how much pain he would get, the main thing was that he wanted to save the people he cared about. As he swam deeper down, Lloyd noticed an incredibly bright light in front of him. He couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him was a huge city that was surrounded by a huge 8-legged creature. Lloyd was shocked to see such a monster. It was the size of a city and it was huge. Lloyd asked the Queen of Mermaids about it, but she only wrinkled her face and did not answer this question. But when Xavier asked the same question, she kindly told that the octopus is the guardian of the city, with which they have existed for a long time. The girl led the boys to the palace and said that they should say hello to the Queen of Mermaids. The queen brought a handsome and not so handsome man, and introduced herself as the mermaid queen named Iolio. Lloyd asked Xavier to ask about the pearl, but he said he was only good looking. The queen told Lloyd not to worry about his ugly face and to speak calmly, but she asked him to turn away. Lloyd told her about his desire to get the pearl of truth, to which he heard only the fierce laughter of the mermaid, who said that if the pearl existed she would lend it to the boy. But no problem. It's just a myth. Lloyd didn't understand what it meant. At the time the queen said it was just a legend and couldn't possibly exist. Lloyd told about the Dragon King and what he had told about the pearl. The queen mocked Lloyd, saying that his brain was the same as his face. At the time Lloyd was cursing the Dragon King and was just despairing. The queen noticed this reaction. She suggested asking the octopus keeper for his opinion. He is the oldest creature in this place. Lloyd's eyes were hopeful, but the queen joked again. Because where is it seen that octopuses talk? Such jokes made Lloyd very angry, and he decided to get down to business. He clarified that the pearl was an object that existed in the mythical era, and this is not a fictional story. The girl said that the ancestors spoke of it as something that existed, but none of them had ever seen it. Lloyd seemed pleased at even such a small hope. He asked the queen for a favor. He asked for the opportunity to do research, and explained that the queen would also benefit from it. The queen said she didn't care, and that either way they would be able to enjoy Xavier's face. The queen said she couldn't help it, because there was a huge problem, namely that the gates of hell had opened over their gates. Lloyd tried not to let it show, for it was the consequence of his deeds, and the queen explained that the heat of hell was causing the ice to melt. The queen couldn't imagine what kind of freak did this. She vowed to kill the bastard. Lloyd started to chime in, saying that the man who did it was a real bastard. The queen said that the man who opened the gate was an evil devil. Lloyd thanked the queen for the opportunity and promised to find the bastard who did it and present him to the mermaid queen. Xavier, who had been watching, was shocked at Lloyd's good judgment. A little while later Lloyd and Xavier were looking at the huge city. The hero said that it was time for them to go in search of the pearl. Lloyd said that they had to find the truth step by step. Xavier wondered what would happen to the gates of hell, but Lloyd said they had to find the pearl, no matter what. Xavier thought that there was always a reason for Lloyd's actions, but now he was trying to get some answer about the gates of hell. But Lloyd ignored the question. It was late at night outside. Inside the building sat a strange girl. her face covered in veins, and she looked like she was under a curse. She was thinking about how she had made her sisters and brothers bleed for the throne, and she called it poison. She clenched her teeth very hard. Then her hand began to twitch and her body was covered with a red aura. It seemed that almost her whole body was covered with this curse. The red aura became denser and denser. The pain was so strong that she could hardly keep from screaming. The queen fell to the ground. Her arm was completely covered in poisoned Wen-Nas. She just lay there breathing heavily. It was unbearable pain. The queen was glad that she had managed to dislodge all the poison into her arm. Then she was determined to cut off that arm, which would allow her to get rid of that poison. She decided that it was okay to sacrifice her arm in order not to go insane. She couldn't understand why she wanted to see the bastard so badly at such a difficult moment. At that time Lloyd was having fun in the kingdom of mermaids. He approached one of them and asked about the pearl, but in response he only heard screaming and hatred from the girl. Xavier echoed Lloyd's words, and the girls immediately began to tell him everything they had heard about the pearl, talking about how sexy Xavier was. Lloyd seemed to fall into a deep depression. Xavier turned and looked at his master. He apologized to Lloyd for the incident. Lloyd said it was all right, and when Xavier remarked on the tears he said it was just rain. After a while, they went to a pineapple at the bottom of the ocean. Instead of SpongeBob, they were met by a crazy guy who was incredibly happy that they were joining the search for the pearl. The system told Lloyd that there was an intimacy between them. Lloyd said he had only come to hear what the guy knew, but he was shocked that it took only a few seconds for the man to form such a strong intimacy. The guy said that his family had been searching for the pearl for years, and it was in ancient times that the pearl was in their sea. And the guy's rant about the pearl's greatness made Lloyd wonder if he was just a fanatic. At the time, the guy said that about 10,000 years ago, the pearl failed. Lloyd's face twisted as he asked if the pearl was broken, but the boy said that not even the mermaids knew about it. He also added that the Pearl of Truth was nothing more than a building. It utilized incredible mana technology that allowed the building to think and react. Lloyd made an analogy with a supercomputer. In fact, the pearl was the same thing, but instead of electricity it used mana. The boy said that was why he was looking for the pearl, because that was where the blueprint for the building itself could be found. Lloyd seemed to realize something, and then asked the boy what the excavation site looked like. After a while, the team went to the site in full force. To the words of the men that the boy was lazing around with a shovel instead of swimming practice. The guy seemed to get angry and started to say that it was because mermaids swim like crazy that their muscles grow but their arms atrophy. The guy started to give a divine massage, which gave the old man a real treat. The boy was angry that he was always treated like a fool, but Lloyd asked why they had not found the pearl, since they had been excavating since the time of their ancestors. The guy explained it simply. The sea floor is incredibly wide, and that's why it's like this. He pointed to the holes he was digging and then showed the map, almost half of which was painted with crosses. Lloyd thought that the mermaid in front of him was a complete nutcase. Lloyd began to think of a way to speed up the process. He even thought about Xavier hitting the bottom, but all that was in the way was that there was no way to lose the building blueprint. Lloyd thought about the fact that for such a job he should prepare a huge number of people. He could only imagine what would happen if it was possible to mobilize the incredible physical strength of mermaids. Lloyd wrinkled his face, then instantly turned to Xavier. He asked him to gather all the mermaids and put them to work. The mermaids begged Xavier's forgiveness as they can't spend their time on anything other than training their bodies and muscles. After that, he and Lloyd were left standing alone. This was the first time Xavier had failed to accomplish something with his face. It caused Lloyd to laugh, for finally Xavier was facing his problems. But after a moment came the realization that the operation was a failure and they needed to object. Lloyd thought about how to speed up the process, because at this rate they wouldn't be able to do it for the rest of their lives. Lloyd was running out of time. Suddenly Xavier told him that it was very hot in this place. Lloyd explained that there was a spring where the water was heated by magma, and suddenly his face changed. Lloyd's plan was to build a sauna in this place and then put all these mermaids to work. In the past, the guy always thought that hard work pays off. But even so he never managed to make money, and there were many reasons to cancel the guy's work, one of which was the limitations of his own body. He was thinking about taking a break, but a friend came up to him and began to openly mock the hero, saying that he was pathetic. Lloyd seemed to react to such behavior with restraint, but inside he was seething. The evil bastard suggested that they go to the sauna together. He said that the hero was definitely tired after hard work, and it would be good to rest. The hero seemed barely restrained from beating the guy up. But he replied with restraint, saying that he didn't have the money to go to the sauna. The bastard smirked at the time, and said it was stupid to assume he didn't know about it. He said he was going to moonlight at the sauna and let the hero steam there for free, but at the time Lloyd couldn't understand why the guy needed a part-time job. Since his family was very rich, it turned out that the sauna belonged to his mom, and starting today he will help her. Lloyd was angry, and the guy ordered the hero to stop whining and follow him. The rich boy seemed to care, but Lloyd realized that it wasn't for nothing, and the boy was up to something. The major said that Lloyd should take his umbrella, since he couldn't afford to buy it. After a while, Lloyd found himself in paradise, enjoying a sauna. The guy was just happy to be on vacation. It seemed like his body was recovering right now. Lloyd even began to feel as if he had become one with the mysterious cycle of the universe. In real time, Lloyd together with Xavier headed through the village. The hero realized that the demand for the sauna will be simply cosmic, because a huge number of mermaids were suffering from muscle pain. Lloyd was confident that now he could finally achieve his goal, and the proec he called simply a rich catch in the kingdom of mermaids. Lloyd told his plan to the Mad Mermaid, but he couldn't understand how it would help him find the pearl. Lloyd said it was the easiest way to get labor, and also noted that the three of them would never be able to dig up the whole area. The madman told one fact, that mermaids are very afraid of steam. He said that some mermaids were tempted by the heat, lay down beside it, and then died inevitably as they lost their minds and went to the hottest places where they were fried to a crisp. Lloyd knew that this behavior was most likely caused by the heavy metals inside the water, but it didn't seem to be a problem for the hero. He said in his ear that a hot chimney would solve all these problems. Lloyd and Xavier began the first phase of construction and found a location, although it was far from the source, but Lloyd said that safety was paramount. He called up the design drawings and then began to design the future building. Lloyd ordered Xavier to follow his instructions while he himself headed for the materials. Xavier immediately grabbed his sword, after which he began swinging it violently in different directions. Lloyd was actually amazed at this obedience. He asked why the servant didn't start asking questions. It was strange to Lloyd that Xavier didn't ask why the pearl was needed. Xavier remained silent and then simply told Lloyd to hurry. He assumed that if they didn't get the pearl their land would be in danger. At such words Lloyd could only walk away and thank his servant profusely. Xavier's face seemed to express no emotion, and Lloyd's reaction was very strange, but a moment later they both vomited at the words. Lloyd went in search of the materials he needed. Luckily the source had everything he needed nearby. Lloyd got to the pipe worms, which were exactly what he needed. The worms started spitting mucus and Lloyd collected the secretions for finishing and gluing. Then Lloyd went to collect the pipe casings, and the third step was to assemble the pipes and install them on the hydrothermal spring. Then they ran the pipes through each room and started finishing. They adjusted the size of the pipes so that each room would have the same temperature. Lloyd began the final phase, themed as the Emerald Room, the Coral Room, the Extraordinary Room. Lloyd solemnly announced that the first sauna in this world was finished, and then immediately rushed to ask the mermaid about the sensations, but he just laid down and did not react to the words of the guy. Xavier didn't understand why Lloyd needed so much money, but he explained that he wasn't going to take money from the mermaids. He turned to Xavier and with a creepy face repeated that he wasn't going to take money. Xavier seemed to have already felt it, the hell that would await the mermaids in the future. Late in the evening a bird flew over the sea, and as soon as it was as low as possible above the water, it seemed as if there was a movement, and then from under the water something began to rush out. It turned out to be a mermaid, which came out of the water and flew very high, which scared the poor animal incredibly much. While the mermaid herself was glowing with joy, he immediately grabbed the poor bird with all her might, which was screaming. The girl and the bird disappeared under the water, while the other mermaids praised the girl, for she had set another record. The girl was #1 in the neighborhood, and with such training muscles grew very well, but now she felt terrible. Everything hurt incredibly badly. She tried to hit herself in the shoulder that would at least somehow dull the pain. The girl beat herself with all her might, which her grandfather complained about. The girl decided to go to training, because if you rest, the spirit will die. The girl cannot just give up her training. Suddenly her attention was attracted by the voice of a man who talked about a way to lose muscle pain. He began to shout about his sauna, which gives the opportunity to safely steamed and relax. The girl was very interested in such an offer. While Lloyd was luring the mermaids inside with the utmost enthusiasm, she couldn't believe it was all free. She knew for a fact that humans were very cunning creatures, and looking at Lloyd, they could only get the feeling that they were looking at a real con man. But looking at Xavier, the girl decided that such a handsome man could not be a bad person. Going inside, she felt as if she had been tricked, but just a moment later she began to feel a pleasant heat. She was shocked, as she was now starting to feel like she was at the age she was in her prime. The girl instantly went to her old man to go to the sauna together. Lloyd was happy to welcome his guests. While the guests were just over the moon, Lloyd thanked the mermaids for visiting the sauna 5 days in a row. At the time, the mermaids couldn't believe such magical results. They rejoiced in joy as they all seemed to have a new life. Lloyd was overjoyed. He thanked the mermaids and said that he was as happy as they were. He said that tomorrow and the next day they would meet again in the sauna. After a while, Lloyd's face was hurt, and the girl noticed the wan look on his face. And when she saw the entrance to the sauna, she instantly asked why it was closed, and Lloyd told her that the event had come to an end, and now the sauna was only available to members of the club that Lloyd had advised the mermaid to join. Lloyd held out the registration form, and the mermaid couldn't figure out what the catch was. The first clause of the agreement was that non-members are strictly forbidden to visit the sauna, as well as there was a restriction on the use of the sauna, namely only 12 hours. But the third clause raised questions, because each member of the club had to pay for his participation, but not with money, but with labor. Lloyd explained that the system was simple. They would have to work 3 hours for a 6-hour sauna. Lloyd explained that there were also penalties for non-payment, and the girl grabbed the guy, then slapped him across the face with all her might, calling him a rotten bastard. She was incredibly angry because some man dared to manipulate the proud mermaids. The girl said that they would do just fine without the sauna, also saying that Lloyd was a rotten crook. Lloyd said there was no way he could make the mermaids choose. Xavier assumed that the operation was a complete failure, but Lloyd explained it very simply. Xavier could have survived without Lloyd's lullaby. The girl was enraged at the man's behavior, and pounded on her muscles, which ached. Lloyd thought about the fact that people lived perfectly well without cigarettes, while the girl beat her arm. Lloyd paralleled that people lived without YouTube and games, but everything changed until they tasted the fruit. The mermaids came to Lloyd. She asked for an application to join, and called the guy a real bastard. Lloyd held out a piece of paper, then with his creepy face asked if they had made their choice.